everyone. Welcome to the 14 Winds podcast, where we discuss the UFO phenomenon and all of its associated high strangeness. I'm Bones, and with us, as always, is the notorious Rom X.
Hey, everybody.
Hey, Rom. And also, we have a special guest that's going to join our discussion on possession. Welcome, Van.
Hey.
So let's get into this possession topic right after we have to discuss the current events that we discussed last episode, and that's the Nazca mummies.
Yeah, the mummy story continues to evolve, and I don't know what they are, and I don't know that we ever will. So there's been some more DNA tests done on the Peruvian mummies. Just a quick recap: a couple months ago, there was a UFO researcher and a scientist that brought some mummies from Peru into the Mexican Congress, and they said that they were evidence of otherworldly bodies. And those bodies were under a CAT scan, and they found that they were one body and not stitched together, so they are human. They are about 1,000 years old, and that's why we may never know. So there has been some DNA analysis done, and the half-life of human DNA is around 512 years, maybe 520. I found a few different, but it was somewhere between 500 and 550. And so the odds of us knowing what this are and definitively is very low. It's basically like looking at a picture that is half gone and saying the half that's gone included an alien.
Right. But you mentioned them being human. I mean, are we going to call them human now, or just still humanoids? Because we don't really know 100%, right?
Right. So that's why these things, it's not right to call them debunked either.
Right.
They're just unknown. They are weird.
Yeah.
And some of the DNA strands were weird. We saw something this morning about the fact that the DNA looked like it was from Myanmar. And they were found in Peru.
Yeah, very strange.
So we don't know. I think those bodies are worthy of as much study as possible, but I don't know how much more is going to be possible given the degrade of the DNA.
Right. So we really don't know what the next step is.
Yeah. So that allows us to maybe move on to the next story, which we're going to open up a big one today, possession. And so why were we looking at possession at all? I mean, we're UFO researchers, and we got into this really to figure out how UFOs flew. And that led us to realize that there is associated high strangeness with UFOs. And if you listen to any of our other episodes, I think you've picked this up. You have a UFO encounter, and then other weird stuff starts to happen. And does possession happen in relation to these cases? That came up in the course of the research because we just started asking, okay, is this related? Is this related? Is that related? And yeah, sure enough, there are some cases of UFO sightings that led to evolving and increasing intensity of high strangeness that ended up in possession. And I think the best example of that is the Ripperston Farm case. So everyone can go do some internet searching around that. I think you're going to find that there were multiple witnesses. There was a lot of weirdness. There was some other evidence involved. It's a very credible case. It meets our standard of evidence. And there was an instance of a possession during that event, or all of those events. So that was a one-to-one direct connection between possession and the UFO phenomenon. So that led us down the road, the very creepy road of looking into possession, I should say. We don't know if it's UFO related. Right. We know that there's instances. So that's why we're exploring it more. And so there are these instances that don't involve UFO possession. And possession itself has become an official mental health condition. So people fought for a long time to get this into the DSM, which is the manual of all these mental health conditions. And then they can start to get addressed. They can get research around them. Other psychiatrists can start to share research. So it was a big deal to get possession into the DSM. And that's now in there. It's a relatively recent improvement here. So there is a very real psychiatric and psychological condition of possession. But we're not psychologists. And so, even though that's fascinating and I think it's worth reading about, what really interests us as Forteans is, did anything supernatural happen during that time? And so we found someone who witnessed a supernatural possession and it meets all of our standards of evidence. So, multiple witness encounter, lifelong experiencer, and open to being interviewed. So, I would like to introduce you to Van Gogh, who has experienced a supernatural form of possession and exorcism. And I'd like you to tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, sure.
Cool. So, why don't you start at the beginning and just tell us about the one that involved the exorcism? I think that's the most drastic case you told me about.
Yeah, so this goes far back when I was like, you know, young. I think I was probably 11 years old. I was a kid. And this happened in a house where a few people were meeting. It was like, like this prayer thing, where people would meet and like pray and like read about the Bible and things like that. And during
And
that,
and that was what type of religion? I believe you said it was
it's
Pentecostal.
Pentecostal. It was Pentecostal. So during that time in there, you know what I mean? It was a small mobile home actually, just to give you a little more details. It was a small mobile home. It was a mobile park, you know, and in there, there was like there was a living room and then the bedroom. And so for the most part, like the kids or the teens, like we'd hang out in the room and then like the adults were, talking about stuff that we didn't care about, like religion and praying and whatever.
Sure.
So at that point, you know, there what I remember was like hearing a commotion, happening. It was mind you, this mobile home is like really 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 tiny and small. So I'm hearing like this whole commotion, so we all like go out to see what's happening, and here we are seeing this woman who was a skinny, very skinny, thin woman who was being held down by, I don't know, six guys. And even at that point, she is like levitating from the ground. She's not moving her mouth and she's speaking. She's like talking and it sounds like really weird. It almost sounds like robotic. So, have you ever seen one of those frogs that really like pull from their throat?
Yeah.
That's what it looked like. It sounds so like something from a movie, but literally it's like my reality and what I experienced and what I saw as a kid. It was really scary, because I've never seen anything like that. Um, and so
How did you
th
and the kids react when that?
we were all scared, and there was like, like my brother's there, my sister, mind you, my sister's 4 years younger than I am, so she was probably like 8 or something like that. My brother's a year and a half older than I am, and then there was like other kids around the same age, like 6, 7, 8, um, and they're all like, we're all seeing this. And, to at some point, like an adult got up and like got the younger kids to go back in. But like we were still there being nosy, like looking at that. Because I mean, like you couldn't avoid it. It was such a tiny spot, you
Yeah.
know?
Sure.
So I remember my brother and I just like witnessing this whole entire thing as it's happening, like a few other people there, like a few other kids who were like teens, we're like looking at this whole entire thing happening, the whole
And
conversation.
I can verify that your brother remembers it too.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
just to establish that there's multiple
Right.
witnesses.
Right.
Yeah. 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 And so what I remember is seeing this woman. Her eyes were closed. They were praying over her, and she is just saying, obscene things. Like she's cursing. She's saying like, "You have no power over me. You are, like all of these like."
Did
She's
she
so,
aim anything at any individual in the room, or were they all general statements?
she was aiming it to the person who was praying over her.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Was she saying anything personal about that person?
no personal stuff.
Okay.
Other than like, you have no power over me, you have no control over me. Um, my legions are strong. Satan is strong. Like all these like things.
And it was directly Satan devil stuff.
Yeah, it was all diabolical stuff. Um, and so like what was going on at that time, as you know, like they're praying for her and like she's this thing is inside of her, you know, she mind you, she never opened her eyes. Her eyes were completely like shut, closed. Um, she just kept like kind of wiggling around trying to like get people off of her. And you know, they were just like praying over her, like telling this thing that's inside of her, like, leave her body, leave her body, leave her body. But at some point, it went from like her speaking Spanish, mind you, this woman didn't speak English, uh, to speaking some weird language that I have no idea what it was. It
Did it sound like tongues, or did it sound like an organized language?
It sounded like tongues. Not tongues like Christian tongues. It sounded like an old language. I don't even know, like maybe Aramaic or something. You know what I mean?
It sounded like words.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I have no idea what she was saying at all. So this went on for like 2 hours almost, until she completely, they kept praying over her, and finally, like, I don't know what happened, but they just kept praying really hard over her. There was a lot of people praying over her. She finally, you know, took a big deep breath and just was yelling like leave me alone. And she just went like, you know, and her body almost like it like puffed up, and then it went from being like puffy to just like a big deep breath, and she literally collapsed, completely collapsed, and was there for a few minutes, like just collapsed. And then they picked her up, you know, and they like sat her down, gave her water, and she was completely like tired. I mean, she was drained, exhausted. But as like they kept like talking to her, I was like, I don't even know how long we were in this thing, you know what I mean? Like we went for an early lunch or something like that, and it was, by the time I remember leaving, was night. So I don't know, like, you know, and of course as kids we like saw that, we were scared, but then when you're a kid you're just like whatever, you like then leave and go out and play, you know. But I do remember coming back and like they're talking to her and she's talking, and hearing my, you know, going home and then hearing my parents talk about this. Like
So-
she had no recollection of what happened, like absolutely no clue what happened to her at all.
So, so she had no idea afterwards. Can you give us a little? Did you see her before the possession?
Yeah, she was like a member of the church, so I knew who she was.
Oh, okay. Do you remember her
You know.
demeanor? Like, was she a shy person or outgoing?
No, she was very like outgoing, talkative,
really?
you know. Her and I kind of connected. She was like probably 10 years older than me, but we, you know, she was a Leo. I'm a Leo, you know. She was like, her birthday was the 14th, my birthday's on the 13th, you know. So it was very like, we always had like some sort of connection, even though she was like older than me, you know. She was like in her, I want to say she was like 25, 24 maybe at that time. I was 11. But like it was funny because we would like hang out, and you know, when you're at church, it's always like that, you know, like there's adults that kind of mingle with the kids or the teens.
Sure.
And things like that. So like, you know, she was always outgoing. She wasn't like a very shy, like, you know, recluse or depressed or no. She was like always kind of like happy, outgoing.
The mobile home you were in, was that hers?
It was not hers. It was not hers. It was someone else's mobile home. What I will say, what she was pointing out too, was that there was elephants in that house. And she kept saying like, oh, the elephants or whatever, like all those elephants that you have are demonic, and that's where I guess it was picking it up from. So I do
Interesting.
remember.
So what you mean elephant tchotchkes? She
Elephant
had
tchotchkes.
Yes, got
Yeah.
it.
They had elephant tchotchkes in there, but as a kid, like I remember like, you know.
And she saw these elephant tchotchkes, and she was making some sort of association that they were demonic because they were probably idolatry of some sort. Very interesting.
And I mean, they had like a ton of elephants, but not like, they were just like little, you know, ornaments, right? Like there were like a few ornaments in the living room, but then there was like like they were saying like, okay, bring all those like tchotchkes out and like break them or like throw them away, you know? And I remember that the kids that lived in that mobile home started pulling out elephants from their room, like hidden elephants, almost like amulets that were like hidden that no one knew where they were. So it was kind of trippy that this woman, while she's possessed, saying like there's these elephants, that were
Right.
like had some sort of thing. Mind you, if you like
That
met
seems
the people,
extremely relevant to me. That seems extremely relevant in this story.
and the
Yeah.
thing is like that I remember like like the couple that owned the mobile home, they're working class. Like the lady worked in like she was a agriculture person who like picks fruits and stuff like that. And the husband was a guy who like worked at a mechanic shop. And the husband would pick up things from the street, like just random things from the street constantly, just like a person that just likes to pick trash. Like you see a chair on the side and they'll pick it up. So I don't know much more than that detail because
But she wasn't reacting to any individual tchotchke.
she wasn't reacting.
Right. It's just it was the presence of all of them that was disturbing. So that's very interesting. That the last episode we did was around the hitchhiker phenomenon, which is when people go to haunted areas and they pick up things, right? They pick up some form of whatever. And in this case, you're an experiencer, right? Your whole family is experiencers, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So this was you've encountered other paranormal things.
Lots of them. I mean, this was not the first exorcist. This is the first exorcist that I saw ever, which I think traumatized me, as a kid seeing this, because it just looks so fake,
Right.
But it's like, it's my reality. It's what I experienced. And, you say to someone else, it's just like a thing of a movie because that's how you see it in movies.
Let's highlight here because I want to get into this a little more. Let's highlight why this was supernatural. So what are those elements that you found about this was supernatural? So you described the voice,
What was supernatural
her
is
physical not moving the mouth, and the voice was coming from somewhere else.
that and the fact that she's like a very skinny lady
Right.
and was able to overpower 6 guys who were holding her hands, her
Right.
waist, her feet, her legs. They were like on her, like she just kept doing like this, just like she just kept kind of, moving. Like it almost felt like
Yeah.
like someone who had superpowers, to like remove, like just lift these people up. And mind you, these guys are like, some of these guys were like 6'1", 6'2", chunky
Sure.
guys. I'm not talking about like some skinny dudes. No, these guys were like dudes, like chunky dudes, like
Yeah.
married men who like don't work out, who just like eat, And so
Yeah.
and so to like, for me to see that, I was like, wow, that's insane. Like I'm thinking in my head, like, what the hell is inside of her?
Yeah.
The changing of the languages. I know this woman she only spoke Spanish and like maybe a few English words. So like, where did that come from? Like, and knowing her, like, I've never heard her make up a language or talk to me in like such a weird language or
Sure.
like even try to like play around like, oh, haha, I know something. I know a different language or like a play language, to try to communicate. Never. So that to me was like strange, and just the overall like things that were coming out of her mouth,
Yeah. So this gets reported. It gets reported. I started doing the research for this episode and to do the write up. And I'll be honest, the reason I haven't done the write up is this whole subject is creepy and confusing. So a few things I want to highlight here. Number one is that you were in a Pentecostal church. And these sorts of things are common, but not in the you normally don't see supernatural stuff associated with them. But you saw lots of people like feeling the Holy Ghost, or maybe even having spirits cast out of them, where maybe, correct me if I'm wrong, but there was nothing supernatural happening there.
No.
Right. So there's a big difference, but there's a belief here. There's a belief that all of this happens. And then there was a belief in that mobile home when that woman was looking at those elephants and saying, I could be infected by a demonic presence. So I don't believe that belief simply translates into some sort of supernatural force. I think something can pick up on that.
And the thing is, like, it happened to her twice. I do remember that. But this time it didn't happen to her. So this one time it happened to her outside of the church, in someone's home. The second time it happened to her at church during prayer time. She started.
And the second time, was there a reason for you to believe that there was something supernatural happening, or no?
Yeah, because like she started choking. She was like choking. She started foaming from the mouth. And then she had her eyes closed. And with her eyes closed, she kind of knew how to navigate to get herself from where she was sitting to try to like go and attack the person who was preaching with her eyes closed. So like, to me, it's like, how does someone know how to navigate from their chair way back in the church and navigate herself through all the way through in the middle to try to go and attack someone? And of course, you know, the same thing happened again, like where they like kind of brought her down and like were holding her down. This time it didn't last 2 hours, but it lasted around like an hour-ish. You know.
So my suspicion is that if someone like you, who is an experiencer and is sensitive to this phenomenon, is in that environment and starts believing that something like that is possible, it becomes far more possible that it's going to happen to you. And I just think that's important to point out based on our research, because, you know, maybe it helps people a little bit.
I mean, it happened to other people, you know what I mean? Like, that was just the one experience from that particular woman. Then it happened to another guy. This guy was a lot more scary because he wasn't as dramatic as her. Again, but like the pattern was the same of like saying curse words, different, you know, this guy was talking, you know, he wasn't like, the voice wasn't coming from somewhere else. But what was strange about this guy was that the next day when he, you know, when we saw him the next day, he had bite marks all over his body. You can't bite yourself on the back or on your side, you know? Which was very strange. He had like bite marks and scratch marks post when this happened to him.
So here's a question. Now, you saw a lot of these things happen in that Pentecostal church where people believe in it. When you're no longer in that church and you haven't been for a long time, have you encountered it since then?
No. Because I'm not in that space.
I feel like that is super important. And that would make someone with a more materialist mindset that really doesn't hold against the evidence go, oh, well, yeah, all those people are nuts over there and they believe in this and that's why it happens over there and it doesn't happen over. But that's not what we're talking about. And hopefully people have heard you. Like, what we're talking about is even the supernatural stuff seems to require a level of belief, participation, if you will.
Yeah, but you know, like for me, mind you, yes, I'm like forced to be part of this religion that I didn't choose to, you know, and but there is a part of me as well that I'm like, you know, as a teenager, you know what I mean? Like you don't really care. You're not part of this. You don't want to be part of this situation. You're almost like I was being dragged by my parents to be there. So for me, like I had no connection, didn't feel any connection to all of that. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
But because I was there, like I witnessed these things that,
sure.
Were they
you know,
were the two individuals? Were they pretty zealous? Were they really into the church? Would you say they're like what was their level of?
yeah, they were into the church, but I feel like they were into the church, but they were like, you know, it's kind of hard to explain sometimes because like unless you're like have been part of this sort of culty church, you know what I mean, and like understand the teachings and da da da, it's kind of hard to explain. But like in the church, there is a thing that you know you're either in it or you're not in it, right? You're either on the bus or off the bus. And then there's people that fall into this category where they're like partially in the church but also partially worldly, right? That's what you
Hmm.
would call them in that church, in like in religion. Like if you're someone who doesn't believe in God or doesn't go to church, you're a person of the world. You're a worldly person, right? That is seen as evil. That is seen as negative. You're not completely devoted to God or devoted to the church. So some of these people are like what you call a foot in and a foot out, right?
Hmm.
And sometimes these people kind of like, you know, they fell in that category where they were like sometimes in, sometimes out, you
Okay,
know?
yeah,
They weren't fully like, you know, like that your older lady, you know, sister so and so who like wears her little veil and like literally prays every single day and like goes to church, does not miss a day at church, even though she's sick. There's a lot of ladies like that and a
Interesting.
lot of dudes like that, and that never happens to them, you know?
right.
If from my experience, it's always the people that are very like not in it or either like maybe, you
Or
know,
yeah, right.
sometimes they are. Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah, so
But
Hmm.
that's a kind of an interesting distinction. So those who like really are dedicated, that really doesn't happen to them. You would think it would be the
That's
opposite.
correct.
Yeah, it's interesting.
That's correct. So a possession usually never happens to someone who is completely in Christ, right? Or in the church, because the teachings say that, you know, like when you're a believer and you believe, like you sort of like you protect yourself from that. God protects you from evil. Because you are constantly saying like, you know, oh God, God, whatever, you know, whatever. You know, you pray to God and you sort of like shield yourself from evil, right? But when you're not, like again, when you're like a foot in and foot out, you almost allow yourself to be an open gate for bad things to come into you,
Right.
well, that's a
right?
belief, isn't it? That's your belief, right? Maybe
Mm-hmm.
someone
Mm-hmm.
who sister so and so who's there every day feels protected.
Mm-hmm.
And these people who are in and out say, "Oh, well, yesterday I was down at the bar and I did some bad things." And it seems like that level of belief is necessary. And I want to point out that this does not just happen in Pentecostal religion. It actually happens worldwide, and it happens across religions.
Right.
And we see
Mm-hmm.
the same thing. We see both the possession happen. I mean, look in Middle Eastern countries. I mean, tons of it in Islamic countries,
Mm-hmm.
where jinn possession very common, and you have to go visit an imam, and so we see the same sorts of things and hear the same sort of reports. That most of them, vast majority of these cases, are psychological or psychiatric,
Mm-hmm.
and there is you can't, when the cases involve some sort of supernatural element, you can't describe that. You don't know what to put, you don't know what category to put that in. And
Yeah.
I'm going to link to both an article from a psychiatrist who has dealt with these supernatural cases of possession and kind of walks in both worlds. And I'm going to link to a scientific paper from a more open-minded journal. It's a journal of religion and health, but they really advocate that for these cases, these specific cases, you kind of have to take a non-materialist point of view. And you
Mm-hmm.
have to take a non-materialist point of view to heal the patient.
Mm-hmm.
Because it was the exorcism that ended up helping that woman.
Yeah.
Well, it's super fascinating. Thanks a lot for that testimony. I mean, that's just really good stuff. And you know what? It opens up a whole can of worms. I think next episode we got to tackle possession and maybe just UFOs and religion. What do you think, Ram?
Yeah, let's go ahead and dive into the UFO and religion thing. I really did not want to do that. I mean, this is already getting into creepy territory.
Right.
And then when you start messing with people's religions, it's just a very dicey line to walk. But let's do it because it's unavoidable.
Right.
It is. But you know what? There's a lot of people like me out there in the world who are like what you call ex-Pentecostals, who also have experienced this. Not just Pentecostals, but also like apostolics and other religions, denominations.
Oh, yeah.
Who are
lots of other people
who will agree with like what you have to say and like what you're putting out there.
Well, there's an epidemic happening right now, a possession epidemic happening in Chile right now, where kids are getting possessed after dealing with Ouija boards, and they're going in and they're having all sorts of, they're going to the hospital and they're dehydrated and having all sorts of other health issues. So even if it's psychological or what people want to call mass delusion, which I do not believe any mass delusion event has ever been proven. There's a funny fact. There's a scientific fact that there really is probably no such thing as mass delusion. So there's something there. It could, but it's worth study.
Yeah, I mean that, and just to like give you some more context, after that happened to that lady, or to this young woman, like, after eight-ish years went by, and none of that ever happened to her again.
Oh wow.
Interesting.
Okay.
Yeah. So same thing with the guy. Nothing that didn't happen to him again.
Well, that seems important. Thank you for bringing that up, and thank you for everything today.
Yeah, of course.
We really appreciate having you on.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Well, I think that wraps it up. Like you said, tune in next episode. We're going to tackle UFOs and religion. And that's about it. Thanks, everyone. This is the 14 Wins Podcast.